Kieu An Hao saved the image in her phone, placed the phone aside, and then slightly tilted her head, glancing at the man beside her. It was hard to tell whether it was his natural temperament, but even though he was peacefully asleep at that moment, he still gave off an impression of no entry vibe, as if warning people not to approach. Kieu An Hao quietly observed Lu Can Nian for a while, then stretched out her hand to gently touch his cheeks. A jolt of electricity ran down her fingers, quickly reaching her heart, making her heartbeat uncontrollably accelerate. If he were awake, she would never have dared to be so bold as to caress him like this. Kieu An Hao stood frozen for a moment. At that moment, she clearly could have reached out and touched him, but she still felt a great distance between them, as though in her entire lifetime she could never approach him. After careful reflection, it was indeed hard to believe. She had silently loved him for 13 years without him even knowing it. It wasn't without bitterness. From the naive age of 13 to now being 26, the best years of her life as a woman, she had given him everything without hesitation, leaving nothing behind for herself. When Kieu An Hao thought of this, a layer of sympathy appeared on her face. She whispered softly, almost to herself, and said in a voice so quiet it was barely audible, "Lu Can Nian, do you know, the only time I dare to say that I love you is in my own imagination?" After saying that, Kieu An Hao sighed lightly, then lowered her eyelids. She quietly extended her hand, gently unwinding Lu Can Nian's arm that was holding her, and silently slipped off the bed. She wasn't sure if it was because she had left the embrace of his arms, but Kieu An Hao felt a slight chill in her body. The clothes that Lu Can Nian had torn were no longer wearable, so Kieu An Hao had no choice but to look for clothes in his dressing room. Inside the walk-in closet, it was filled with men's clothes, and after searching for a while, she finally found a simple t-shirt, which she put on. Lu Can Nian was much taller than her, and the t-shirt she wore could almost be considered a dress. Because of giving Lu Can Nian medicine and ending up in another intimate moment, Kieu An Hao did not dare to get too close to the bed again. She only sat on the sofa, far from the bed in the bedroom. Around midnight, unable to resist any longer, Kieu An Hao curled up on the sofa and dozed off. However, her sleep was light, and when the first rays of sunlight streamed through the window and hit her face, she opened her eyes wide, fully awake. Rubbing her eyes, she looked at the bed, and Lu Can Nian was still not awake. Kieu An Hao stood up, walked to the bed, and reached her hand to touch Lu Can Nian's forehead to check if his fever had gone down. However, before her hand could touch his skin, her wrist was suddenly gripped forcefully. Kieu An Hao was startled. She lowered her head, only to find herself locked in eye contact with Lu Can Nian, both staring at each other in the same place.
Perhaps it was because he had just woken up, but Lu Can Nian's face looked somewhat dazed. He stared at Kieu An Hao for about 2 seconds. Then his gaze landed on her wrist, which he was still holding. He didn't understand why she had extended her hand in front of him. Furrowing his brows, he spoke in a cold, somewhat groggy tone. "What do you want?" After speaking, Lu Can Nian recalled that he had returned to the Yishan villa. With some doubt, he turned his head to survey the surroundings and confirmed that this was indeed the bedroom of the Yishan villa. Then his gaze fixed sharply on Kieu An Hao. His voice was direct, cold, and questioning. "How do you know I have a villa here? Who allowed you to come to this villa?" As soon as Lu Can Nian finished speaking, his eyes swept quickly over Kieu An Hao, who was wearing his shirt, and his brows furrowed even more. Then he realized that under the blanket he was completely naked, and vague images of him and her sleeping together flashed through his mind. His gaze again focused on Kieu An Hao, noticing the many hickeys on the exposed skin of her body. Lu Can Nian gripped Kieu An Hao's wrist, tightening his hold. last night." The moment Kieu An Hao heard those 4 words, her heart skipped a beat. What was meant to happen had happened. She instinctively opened her mouth to explain. "I heard you were sick, so I came to visit you, and then I helped you take the medicine." Kieu An Hao managed to explain halfway, but she didn't know how to continue explaining what had happened after they ended up in bed together. Although Lu Can Nian had been delirious from fever the night before, he still vaguely remembered what had occurred. The bitter pill that was shoved into his mouth last night. She had blocked his lips to feed him the medicine. Lu Can Nian's lips twitched slightly, and his icy expression softened a little. Kieu An Hao noticed that he was silent for a long while, not understanding what he was thinking. Her heart grew even more anxious, and after hesitating, she continued, "Last night, I didn't expect that we would do that." Before Kieu An Hao could finish her sentence, Lu Can Nian suddenly forcefully pulled her hand away. He used some strength, and Kieu An Hao stumbled 2 steps back. She lost her balance and heard his cold voice, sharp and domineering from above. "What do you want?" Lu Can Nian's abrupt words caught Kieu An Hao off guard. She didn't immediately understand what he meant. She looked into his eyes, which were filled with confusion. Lu Can Nian met her gaze and, as if understanding her confusion, casually spoke again. "Once, you approached me because of your role in Dilao Tian Huang and asked to sleep with me. Now that you've slept with me, what do you want in return?"
Kieu An Hao's heart sank, falling into the deepest and coldest place. Earlier, she had said that she would exchange her body for a role because, in that urgent situation, she was afraid he would see through her feelings, so she said that. But now, he actually viewed her as the type of person who used her body to make deals with men. Kieu An Hao pressed her lips together, saying nothing. Lu Can Nian waited for a moment, seeing that Kieu An Hao didn't seem to have any intention of speaking, and he broke the silence between them in a neutral tone. "Why aren't you saying anything? You went to great lengths to find out that I had a villa here. You knew I was sick, so you rushed here to give me medicine and took care of me all night. After doing all this, don't you want something from me? You just said last night you didn't want to do that with me." Lu Can Nian paused here, suddenly stopping, feeling a strange thought come to mind. He remained silent for a long time, but after a while, he swallowed hard, glaring intently into Kieu An Hao's eyes, as if trying to read something from her gaze. His tone, cold and devoid of emotion, continued. "Didn't you come here and not once think about asking for something in return?" Kieu An Hao was truly surprised that her feelings had been so easily revealed by Lu Can Nian. Her hand instinctively clenched into a fist as she tried to steady herself, calming her emotions. She spoke in a calm tone, saying, "2 days ago, I auditioned for the 2nd female lead role in this year's key film by Huanying Media, Khuynh Thanh Thoi Gian, but I didn't get the part." She really hadn't expected that once again, in an attempt to hide her emotions, she had turned herself into a commodity for exchange. Kieu An Hao pinched the palm of her hand until it hurt, but her expression remained unchanged, and with composure, she continued. "The cast for this film is large, and even before filming, it has gained a lot of attention. If you really want to give me something in return, then give me the 2nd female lead role." Lu Can Nian didn't respond, his eyes still fixed at Kieu An Hao, staring at her again and again. His eyes darkened, and suddenly his body twisted, fiercely getting out of bed. He strode over to Kieu An Hao, grabbed her wrist, and forcibly pulled her out of the bedroom. He dragged her down the stairs to the door of the villa and opened it. Lu Can Nian immediately pulled Kieu An Hao in front of him. His movements paused for a moment before, without hesitation, lifting her up and forcibly throwing her out of the villa. Then he raised his hand and slammed the door shut with a loud bang. The sequence of actions was sudden and aggressive, and Kieu An Hao had no time to resist. By the time she regained her senses, she had already been thrown out of the villa. However, her bag, car keys, phone, and coat were still upstairs.
Just as Kieu An Hao hesitated about whether she should knock on the door to get her things, suddenly, the villa gate, which had been tightly closed in front of her, was violently yanked open. Then, several items from inside were thrown out. Kieu An Hao didn't have time to fully comprehend what was happening before the villa gate slammed shut with a loud bang. Her bag, which didn't have a zipper, was directly thrown by Lu Can Nian, and the items inside scattered all over the ground. Kieu An Hao stood outside the villa stunned for a moment before she crouched down to pick up her belongings and put them back into her bag. Once Kieu An Hao had gathered everything, she looked at the closed gate in front of her, bit her lip, then silently turned around and walked away. Lu Can Nian returned to the bedroom, and as he was about to take out a cigarette from the drawer of the nightstand, he noticed a box of medicine on the nightstand. Kieu An Hao had bought fever medicine. Lu Can Nian's gaze darkened slightly as he picked up the box and threw it in the trash. He then took a cigarette, lit it, and walked over to the window, taking 2 deep puffs. The smoke curled into his chest, calming him slightly. When Lu Can Nian had smoked about half of the cigarette, he saw Kieu An Hao through the window carrying her bag. Watching her silhouette as she left, his fingers trembled slightly. He then brought the cigarette to his mouth and took a sharp drag, holding it in his mouth for a long while before slowly exhaling. The smoke drifted away. He clearly saw Kieu An Hao open the car door, sit inside, and then, less than a minute later, start the car and drive off. Lu Can Nian waited until the car was no longer in sight, then lifted his hand to continue smoking. Afterwards, he put the cigarette out in the ashtray on the balcony. He stood on the balcony for a while before turning and returning to the bedroom, then picking up his phone and making a call. Leave the second female lead role of Khuynh Thanh Thoi Gian vacant. I want to arrange it for someone else. Also, postpone all announcements for my upcoming films. I will play the second male lead in Khuynh Thanh Thoi Gian. There's nothing wrong. After many years of playing the lead role, it's nice to occasionally take on the second male lead. Besides, I never really wanted to act anymore. Alright, you don't need to say anything more. Just do as I say. Lu Can Nian finished his sentence, and without giving the person on the other end a chance to respond, immediately hung up the phone. After his fever, Lu Can Nian's body hadn't fully recovered. He casually tossed the phone onto the bed, then sat down on the edge of the bed, feeling a bit tired. His gaze drifted toward the trash can. He stared for a long time before shaking his head, standing up and walking over to the trash can to pick up the box of fever medicine inside. Lu Can Nian stared at the box of medicine, a flicker of desolation passing through his eyes.
Kieu An Hao, having been kicked out of the Yisan villa by Lu Can Nian, drove straight to the Jin Su Yuan villa. She didn't have any fame or announcements, so for the next 4 days, she stayed inside the villa at Jin Su Yuan without going out. During these 4 days, Lu Can Nian didn't return home even once. One late night, not sure if it was because she had slept too much in the afternoon, Kieu An Hao tossed and turned in bed, unable to fall asleep. She picked up her phone and glanced at the clock. It was almost midnight. Kieu An Hao turned her head to glance at the empty side of the bed, thinking that he probably wouldn't return tonight. When he came home, she would feel anxious and uneasy, but when he didn't return, her heart felt a wave of loss. Kieu An Hao lifted the blanket, got out of bed, casually put on a jacket and went to the balcony. She stared at the darkness outside the window, her expression becoming a bit lonely. In his heart, he had never considered her his wife, That was why, more than 5 months after their marriage, she had spent the majority of her time alone managing the house. After standing there for a while, Kieu An Hao's phone suddenly rang. She returned to the bedroom, picked up her phone and saw an unfamiliar number on the screen. Who could be calling her at such a late hour? Kieu An Hao hesitated for a moment before answering, her voice soft. "Hello, may I ask who this is?" The voice on the other end was concise and to the point. "This weekend, officially joined the Khuynh Thanh Thoi film crew, second female lead." Kieu An Hao held the phone tightly in her hand, surprised. She never expected this call would come from Lu Can Nian himself, informing her of the news. Kieu An Hao took a deep breath, then spoke politely to the person on the other end. "I understand, thank you, Mr. Lu." Kieu An Hao almost blurted out Lu Can Nian by mistake, but quickly corrected herself, addressing him more formally. Kieu An Hao waited for a response, but it felt like her words had sunk into the sea, receiving no reply. Had the call been disconnected? If not for the faint static noise from the phone, she would have thought the line had been cut off. After a long pause, when Kieu An Hao thought that Lu Can Nian had finished giving the announcement but perhaps had mistakenly pressed the wrong button, Kieu An Hao casually tossed her phone aside. Just as Kieu An Hao was wondering whether she should hang up, the voice of Lu Can Nian came through, calm and detached, with a hint of cold sarcasm. "This is what you, Miss Kieu, exchanged your body for. No need to thank me. It's just that your body is quite valuable. It's enough to earn you the role in Khuynh Thanh Thoi Gian." Lu Can Nian, on the other end, seemed to want to say something more, but suddenly stopped. After a brief silence of about 2 seconds, the call was abruptly cut off.
Although Lu Can Nian had not finished his sentence, Kieu An Hao was sure that it wasn't going to be anything good. In fact, for the past few days, Kieu An Hao had been struggling to understand. Clearly, the one who had slept with her and then said she wanted something in return was Lu Can Nian. But when she had actually turned their relationship into a transaction, demanding something from him, he immediately acted as though he could not stand the sight of her and had thrown her out of the villa. Now, after hearing what Lu Can Nian said before hanging up the phone, Kieu An Hao finally understood why he had been so angry that day. He thought she had overestimated her own worth. It was true. She should have thought about it earlier, shouldn't she? From the beginning, he had never wanted to sleep with her, so to him, what made her body worthy of exchanging for the second male lead role in Khuynh Thanh Thoi Gian? If he hadn't been feverish and sick that day, he probably would have looked down on even touching her. Kieu An Hao thought that in this world, she was the only woman who was both slept with and then rejected. She was the only wife who, after being married for almost a half year, still didn't know her husband's phone number. As she thought about this, Kieu An Hao couldn't help but press her lips together and laugh bitterly, a faint trace of sadness appearing in her eyes. The Khuynh Thanh Thoi Gian project was an investment of $2 billion by Khuynh Media, and the new film had been in preparation for 2 years. They had invited an international-level post-production team, along with a renowned team of world-class screenwriters. Such an advertising strategy was enough to draw attention to the film. Of course, the film hadn't started production yet, but the huge buzz had already made headlines on Weibo. The star-studded cast was extremely powerful. Aside from newcomers like Kieu An Hao, even the background extras were some of the best performers in the entertainment industry. The first day of shooting for Khuynh Thanh Thoi Gian was just a ceremonial kickoff. All the celebrities attending the film had shown up, but the second male lead position remained vacant. Since the official filming would begin the following day, after the opening ceremony, the producers and directors of Khuynh Thanh Thoi Gian deliberately hosted a party to invite all the actors. The purpose was for everyone to get to know each other a bit, so that during filming they wouldn't have trouble getting into character due to unfamiliarity with one another. When Kieu An Hao and Jia Ming arrived, the seats in the VIP box were already full. Before joining the film, Kieu An Hao had done her homework, so she recognized everyone there. Whether they were producers, directors, or actors, she knew them all. These people had entered the entertainment industry long before Kieu An Hao and were considered her seniors. So she politely stepped forward and greeted each one in turn. The producer of Khuynh Thanh Thoi Gian was sitting at the far end. Just as Kieu An Hao was about to extend her hand to greet the producer, someone else beat her to it, stepping forward with open arms. "Mr. Sun, long time no see!"